the night is holding on to me. God is holding on.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to be back in the house of the Lord. Hopefully you guys recognize me. I've been here a few times. I am James Whiteley. And this morning we are going to do something that I have never done before as a preacher. And that is we're going to read from the Bible. So I'm going to tell you to grab your Bible or get your phone and head to 1 Samuel chapter 17. Because we're going to go through that entire story. It's about 60 verses. I'm going to talk a little bit as we go through it and give a little application at the end. So it should be great. I'm going to tell you about 25 years ago or so, I read the Bible from left to right, from cover to cover for the very first time. And it took me almost 3 years to get through the whole thing, but it was very enlightening. And one of the things when I read the story of David and Goliath, there were just parts I had heard about in Sunday school, but I had never read what the Bible actually said. And I will say, and I will encourage you, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, they are very, very interesting books of the Bible. So much is going on. Tremendous family dynamics. There's wars. There's all kinds of things happening. And it is just, you can read secular books about Israel's history, and you can read that in the Bible and back and forth. It's very interesting. I hope you're able to read it. I certainly hope you'll read along with me. Again, 1 Samuel chapter 17. It's the story of David and Goliath. Hopefully you're getting there. Back to when I was reading the Bible through so long ago, I can remember there were times, there's stuff I didn't understand or just some things, and I would write it down and go ask my pastor or go ask some church leaders about those things, and usually that answer. Sometimes we all had to look some things up, but it was a tremendous experience for me. And again, I want to encourage you to do that. Hopefully you're there. 1 Samuel chapter 17. I guess the last thing I'm going to say before I start reading is I did get a master's in divinity. I do not have a master's in pronunciation. So this very first few verses, there's a couple, I'm going to say them real fast. You'll be reading along, so we should be okay. I'll also tell you that when I went to seminary, I did take a class in preaching, and the normal thing is you have an introduction, you have exegesis of the text. You read the verses, you have 3 points, you apply those, and then you have a conclusion. That is not the method today. So again, we're just going to read the Bible. Here we go. 1 Samuel chapter 17. We're going to start in the very first verse. And we're gonna go from there. Story of David and Goliath. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for the war and assembled at Socoh and Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes Dammim between Socoh and Azekah. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with the valley between them. And again, if you go back in history, the way battles were fought, this was fairly common. We didn't have guns. Combat was very vicious, very, very close. You could often see your enemy. Typically, all the battles were during the daytime, and that's just how it happened. Starting verse 4, a champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out from the Philistines' camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span. And the Bible actually says that's 9 feet. And the closest reference I have to that in 2020, Manute Bull was about 7'7", Yao Ming, I think it was 7'6". Regardless, Goliath was a very big individual. He had starting verse 5, he had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat and scale of armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and on a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went ahead of him. So here's what I would get from that. The point is, Goliath was big. He was extraordinarily strong. He was a warrior. All that he's wearing is very heavy. So he is what we'd call a modern day stud. Verse 8, Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, he will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistines said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." And upon hearing Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Again, this is one man close enough that you can hear him yelling, and they were scared. And I would point out that at this point, Goliath is doing with his leader's permission, because the leader knows that Goliath is clearly the strongest and toughest and best warrior the Philistines have. They were extraordinarily confident that he could not only kill one Israelite, but multiple at the same time. And if you look from the other perspective, as the Israelites, they were terrified. When your leader's terrified about it, they were scared. Verse 12, now David was the son of an Ephraite named Jesse, who was from Bethlehem in Judea. Jesse had 8 sons, and in Saul's time he was very old. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul to war. From the firstborn was Eliab, the second was Abdon, and the third was Shammah. David was the youngest. The 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And again, if you can think of the family dynamics here, of course, the youngest, littlest brother is the one that's going to be in the brother's eyes. He's not the warrior. He needs to take care of the sheep, take care of the family stuff. Well, we do the manly things, and we'll take care of this fight. You go do your thing. And I would also say, again, back then, this is relatively common that in a war, battle like this, there were either servants or little brothers or whomever taking care of the family farm, the family ranch. Verse 16, for 40 days, the Philistine, that's Goliath, came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. Now, the only thing I'm going to say about that is I always find it amazing in the Bible how some of those biblical numbers, 47, 12, 3, are referenced so often and have such important meanings. Verse 17, now Jesse said to his son David, take this ephah and roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are and bring back some assurance from them. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah fighting against the Philistines. So, the point there is, of course, Jesse is looking out for his sons, and he wants David to bring him this food and to the commander and all that kind of stuff. But even David's father didn't see his own son as a warrior, as a fighter. All right, verse 20. Early in the morning, David left the flock in the care of a shepherd, loaded up, and set out as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting out their war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines, facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of supplies, ran to the battle line, and asked his brothers how they were. As they were talking to them, Goliath, the Philistine, the champion from Gath, stepped out from the lines and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. Whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him in great fear. Again, we've talked about that. Now I'm going to read quite a few verses here because this next part of the story I really enjoy. So let's let the Bible speak to us here for just a moment. So starting in verse 25. Now the Israelites had been saying, do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage and will exempt his family from taxes in Israel. David asked the men standing near him, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and remove this disgrace from Israel, who is uncircumcised Philistine, that Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Okay, now David's onto something. They repeated to him what they had been saying and told him, this is what will be done for the man who kills him. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down here just only to watch the battle. Again, I would just say, those of you that have some brothers or many siblings, this is sometimes how we act in families. A little bit of jealousy going on here. Certainly didn't want David to get any credit and kind of get out of there and, again, take care of things are at home. I myself am in a family with 4 older sisters. You can imagine what that was like. Verse 29, now what have I done, said David. Can't I even speak? He then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter. And the men answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul. And Saul sent for him. Verse 32, David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Can you imagine what Saul thought when he heard that from David? Hadn't even been on the battle. Was not a warrior. Let's find out. Let's read the next verse. Verse 33. Saul replied, you are not able to go out against the Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it. I struck it. I rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned to me, I seized it by its hair. I struck it and I killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine. Now I'm just going to pause here for just a second and just let those words sink in just a little bit. You have to love, you have to appreciate David's faith. And I would challenge each of you, and I'm really going to do that at the very end, but I'd challenge each of you to believe in the power of God. The God that created this universe, the God that, saved my soul, that's this God. He has power we can never understand beyond us. David has faith in him. We all need to have that kind of faith in him. Saul said to David, go and the Lord be with you. Verse 38, then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried to walk around because he was not used to them. I cannot go in these, he said to Saul, because I am not used to them. So he took them all off. And then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from a stream, put them in the pouch in the shepherd's bag, and with the sling in his hand, he approached the Philistine. Now, I'm just going to circle back to when I read the Bible the first time. I don't remember ever hearing this part of the story, that David, in fact, tried on all this armor and recognized that it didn't fit, took it all off, has that faith in God. I was really struck by that when I read it for the first time. That he, in fact, went to this battle with choosing not to have that kind of protection. Verse 41. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, I am a dog that you come at me with sticks. And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Come here, he said, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and to the wild animals. I'm just going to say, I would never, ever want to curse God, nor should have Goliath. But let me just read, starting at verse 45. This is some beautiful stuff here. Ready? Verse 45. David said to the Philistine, You come against me with sword and spear and javelin. But listen, I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. This day the Lord will deliver. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down, and I will cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by my sword or spear that the Lord saves for the battle. It is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. I want to pause again. That's another wow. I mean, you think of this little young man, non-warrior, and this big Goliath just ready to fight. And David is clearly putting all his faith in God. Okay, I'm on verse 48. And by the way, just a side note, I am reading for the NIV, just so we're correlated with the Bible. Obviously, there's a few words that are a little bit different in each translation, but that's the one I'm reading from. As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet him. So the Philistine's coming. David is running to this fight, reaching into his bag. This is David reaching into his bag and taking out a stone. He slung it, and he struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down upon the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from the sheath. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. Now, I can guarantee you, I heard this story many times when I was a kid in Sunday school. Never once did the teacher say, David cut off the head of Goliath. Never heard that once till I read that in the Bible 25 years ago. And I was stunned. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and they ran. Then the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout and pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath and to the gates of Ekron. Their dead were strewn along the Shaharam road to Gath and Ekron. When the Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines, they plundered the Philistines' camp. And of course, they're the victors, the spoils. But that all starts with David killing Goliath. And all the confidence the Philistine had in Goliath, the fact that someone was able to kill him, they were now suddenly terrified. Turned around, and of course the Israelites followed. 54, David took the Philistine's head. He took his head and he brought it to Jerusalem. He put the Philistine's weapon in his own tent. And just doing a little research on this, actually, David did this not only as a trophy, but because honestly the Israelites lacked swords, and Goliath was huge. It's an enormous amount of metal. Verse 55, as Saul watched David going out to meet the Philistine, he said to Abner, commander of the army, Abner, whose son is that young man? Abner replied, as surely as you live, your majesty, I do not know. The king said, find out whose son this young man is. As soon as David returned from killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul, and with David still holding the Philistine's head. Ugh. Whose son are you, young man? Saul asked him. David said to him, I am the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem. And of course, this was done because Saul had made that promise to reward him and reward the family, and of course he wanted to follow through with all of that. So, we finished. I think that's 58 verses, and I'm going to tell you. I'm going to say it again. I think that's an incredible story. And I did all that. I did this very different to make really this one point. This point. Listen to me. What is your Goliath? What is going on in your life that you're trying to handle yourself, you're trying to cope, you're stressed about it? What is your Goliath? I mean, we've been in this COVID-19 pandemic that has been stressful for a lot of people. Some people have lost their jobs. There's financial pressures, just being home more with your wife, your spouse, and your kids. There's been domestic violence is on the rise. Just juggling teaching your children and your job if you're teleworking or whatever. There's lots of stressors, and I'm not even getting to there's so many more things to say, but I'm saying to you right now in your heart, when I ask that question, what is your Goliath? What comes to mind? What do you know you're not turning over to God? And I'm going to say, I use this phrase a lot, and I'm going to say it again here: the God I worship, the God I serve, the God that created this universe, the God that parted the Red Sea, the God that rose from the dead, the God that knows the amount of hair on your head, that knows your worries before you even voice them. That's the God, the most powerful in the entire universe. That's the God I'm asking you to turn your problems over to Him. Pray about it. Let it go. And know that God is your Father. You are His child, and He wants the best for you, just like you want the best for your kid. And He will do what needs to occur. Sometimes you don't even know what all those circumstances are, but He'll take care of your needs. But you have to trust Him. You have to know God does not want you stressed over whatever that issue is. And when I ask you, what is your Goliath? And you know what it is. In just a minute, we're going to pray. And I hope that you will pray to God to allow Him to handle whatever that is, or however many things they are. Let Him handle it. God knows what your Goliath is. God knows what you're worried about. Today, tomorrow, however long it takes you to get that out, pray to Him. Let it go. So I'm a real big fan of in this opportunity. I know we're all not in church, but we're at our homes in different places. I am going to take a very probably 10 or 15 seconds to kind of allow for us to pray corporately, quietly, and then to ourselves. And then after about 10 or 15 seconds, I'm going to close this with prayer. But I'm just going to ask you, what is your Goliath? Turn it over to God, and He will handle it. So let's bow our heads and pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, I love you so much, and I know you are here with every single person. You are connecting all of us in some way, the Holy Spirit is amongst us. You're with each family, wherever they are worshiping, wherever they're praying. I know you are there. And Lord, I just pray that everyone that is listening to this service or watching this service, Lord, I just pray that their heart and their mind open up to you, to your power, to trust you, that you will allow them to work in their lives, each one of them, and you will take care of whatever their issue is. Lord, I pray for each one of us today that we'll turn over the things that are bothering us, and that we'll trust that you will take care of it in ways that we may never understand or see, but we'll know that you're in control and you're taking care of each and every one of us. Lord, I pray you'll bless this church and be with each member of the church. Lord, I lift up my brother Steve to you as the pastor. I pray you'll continue to bless him and help him lead this flock. Lord, I pray and I thank you for all the blessings you've bestowed on each one of us, and I pray all of these things in your Son's holy and precious name. Amen.
You are here, moving in now. worship you, worship you. You are here, moving in our midst. Worship you, worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you, worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Who you are, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, you're turning lives around. I worship you, I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you, I worship you. Who you are, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Who you are, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 Isaiah 41:10 says, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. Never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop. Oh, you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My